Matt Fraction's current Batman run is generational. It's absolutely phenomenal. And you guys will see what I'm talking about here in a little bit. So, this introduces a new villain that Batman doesn't even know he has. That's how capable this guy is. So this opens up at the port of Gotham. And this guy, right, this dock worker essentially goes to open the door of this truck. And before he can even say it's an ambush, the people inside the truck open fire and just blast everybody to bits. And at that point, it's a news broadcast. Breaking news overnight of a firefight at the port of Gotham. The violent scene captured in this exclusive and disturbing footage from News Drone 4. 4-alarm fire broke out overnight in the slabs. 3 businessmen in Wolf Hill gunned down. Basically, Gotham City's turned into a madhouse overnight, like literally in one night. It's like The Godfather, right? Michael Corleone taking these shots at these 5 families. But in this instance, we don't seem to know who's doing it, because what ends up happening is you pick up with this new guy. He says all of this over a truck. And he says 2 nights ago, the Clonuri and the Black Fang ran a job that they tried to keep off books from us, with the former paying the latter in uncut stones the Fang owe the Thieves Guild. And that's where this like tech guy, right, with these glasses just says, said stones were cleverly stashed in a Besna truck's gas tank. Of course, some random rat-ass undergang tries to boost said truck. The truck jackers get got. Gotham City Police Department impounds the truck, nobody gets paid. And then last night, chaos ensues. Now 3 of our partners are locked into a gang war over a stupid coincidence. And that's where this guy says, no, right? Coincidence only brings good fortune. This is a conspiracy. We have a rat. Find them. And in the meantime, freeze all Taurus accounts at the bank now, right? And he starts running off the names of all these different crime families, right? The Capitolinas, the Clonuri Interlope, Dantai Tozuki, the Thieves, the Black Fang, and La Penitenta, which sounds horrifying once you get into it. If the only thing these animals understand is money, then none of these animals can have any until they learn to act like men. The Minotaur calls for parley. I am in the mood to ruin everybody's night, so call your little Morlocks in the sewers. And before we can find out what's going on, you end up switching over to Dr. Annika Zeller. Now, here's the thing about Annika Zeller. Annika Zeller has been around for the first 3 issues. These are issues 4 and 5, right? So she's been around for the first 3. And the easiest way to think about her is that she is, by all standards of measurement, on the edges of fringe science, if you want to call it that. Basically, she's working on a combination of psychotherapy and technology that can be used in such a way to essentially fix the personalities of villains and turn them into normal people. And so I want you to keep that in the back of your head, because that's going to kind of make her a major target over the course of this story. But of course, Bruce Wayne walks in. Annika's on the treadmill, she's working on her science stuff, she has no idea that it's Bruce, right? And so he just says, Dr. Zeller, right? Dr. Annika Zeller. And she says, I'm working, talk to Dr. Batman. And Bruce is like, what? And she's like, the stuff bad over there, right? Engineering named him Dr. Batman. Ask him your question first, in detail. He's only a stuffed bat, so he's pretty dumb. Everybody's got to get through the Batman to get to me. And so he just says, right, I don't understand. And she's like, so are you new here, right? First time in the building or something. And he just says, yeah, like, actually, it's my first time here. And she says, office policy, new guy. When people come to me with project-related problems, most times the solutions present themselves while they explain it to me, which, hey, is great for them. But for me, it's a total train of thought derailment. The flow's shot, momentum's gone, and my time is wasted. So tell the bat, and if he cannot help you with it, then I will. And so that's where Bruce addresses Dr. Batman. And he's like, Dr. Batman, right? And then he just kind of looks around and he's like, why titanographine? And he says, it's rare, patented, difficult to fabricate, and expensive. And she just says, it won't last, right? We play the long game here. And she says, we're fighting a forever war against a persistent hostile condition, the chaos in our patients' minds. It can only be countered by persistent benevolent tactics. One day, the crown of storms will be no different from a pacemaker, so we build for permanence now. Otherwise, we may as well be making boats out of paper, fine as a model. And that's where Bruce finishes the statement and says, but put it in water and you sink. And so she says, bingo, right? so we do it right. So what she's really talking about here, right, to kind of provide some context, with the Crown of Storms, it is really made with titanographene. It is an almost completely indestructible material. When she talks about the idea that it will basically be something akin to a pacemaker, she's talking about actually inserting it into the human brain in order to correct people's behavior, which she kind of does to a degree, but it's one of the things that makes her so incredibly controversial. There's a kind of school of thought within the Batman mythos as far as the psychological side goes, right, from interviews that have happened that we've seen in the comic over the course of the first 3 issues, which is that on one side, people are looking at this and saying, yes, right, clearly these are people with behavioral conditions of varying degrees that just make them too dangerous for society. But on the other side, there are people who are saying, inserting some kind of technological device into a person's brain basically strips away their own identity and replaces it with one that you find to be acceptable. Who is society to make that determination? So it's kind of a back and forth, right, type thing. And so as Bruce continues talking to her, right, she's like, if I ever get into a room with Bruce Wayne to plead my case, then I will let you know, right, as far as his whole idea of even if right means inserting these devices into people's heads. And that's when he introduces himself as Bruce. And she's kind of taken off guard by this, right? Now, this is one of the other things that I hope you're noticing too. Matt Fraction, historically, when it comes to writing comic books, is stupendous at writing personal interactions. There's almost none better in the comic book industry than Matt Fraction when it comes to writing how two characters talk and interact. It's kind of this almost perfect blend between Bendis speak, right, where characters say every single thing, and they interact in ways that humans just don't do. And traditional comic book storytelling, where writers just kind of leave it to you to fill in the blank, it feels so natural. Right? It's really awesome the way he handles things. And so when she observes Bruce, she's like, have we met? And he's like, no, I don't think so. Because she recognizes the physical structure of his body, right? Just as Batman, but she doesn't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And so that's where he says, right? It really is my first time in the building. After the events of last night, the Riddler and whatnot, I thought I'd pop my head in and see if everything was okay here. And that's where she just says, right? If I knew attempted robbery was what it took to grab your time and attention, I'd have broken in myself a year ago, Mr. Wayne. And so at that point, he just says, Bruce, and my time and attention are all yours tomorrow night. Say 7 o'clock, I'll pick you up. Sorry to interrupt your flow, doctor, and leaves. Now, here's the thing when it comes to Bruce Wayne, like this guy's riz is next level. When Bruce Wayne asks you on a date, it's not really a question, right? When Bruce Wayne is like, we're going to go on a date, and I'm going to pick you up, right? That's a big thing. Bruce Wayne, I mean, he's Batman, right? But outside of that, for the people who only know him as Bruce, this guy's all over the place, right? He's one of the major players in the city of Gotham. So if this man stops what he's doing and pays attention to you long enough to ask you on a date, it means that he's actually interested in you, right? And so that's where she's kind of caught off guard. She's like, 7, like, what are you talking about? And her coworkers are like, oh, you have a date with Bruce Wayne, right? And she's like, no, it's not a date. And they look at her because she's basically wearing Crocs, and they're like, do you actually have some real shoes? Like, you have real shoes, right? And so at that point, you pick up with Houston. Now, Houston appeared in the first 3 issues, and the idea behind his character is that he had actually recorded police planting evidence on a crime scene, breaking the law, but he didn't know what to do with it. I mean, this is not something that you just upload onto the internet. I mean, you could, but the reality is when you're talking about a place like Gotham City, where the very police themselves are ran by Vandal Savage, who is traditionally a Justice League villain, but it basically weasels his way into becoming the new commissioner of the Gotham Police Department, the instant you do that, the police department and all of Vandal Savage's political connections will wipe it from the internet, and they'll go after Houston and everybody that he knows and loves. And even if they can't take it off the internet, they'll go after him anyway. And so he did the only thing he could do. He went and sought out a reporter just by name recognition, and he brought the information to that reporter. Why? Because when you're talking about a corrupt political institution like you have in Gotham, or corrupt police like you have in Gotham, sometimes the court of public opinion, as unreliable, wishy-washy, and as illogical as it may be, sometimes it's the only thing that you can go to. And so that's why you pick up with Jack and Houston at the Gotham Eve. And Jack tells Houston, right, I wish you could have seen this place when it was a real newspaper. Once upon a time, there were 17 dailies in town, but now I know Cherry Hill Funeral Homes more alive than this place. And so Houston asks, right, what happened? And Jack just tells him, more drivers, fewer commuters, cable news, the number of papers goes down, down, so the paper prices go up. And so Houston just says capitalism, right? And that's where Jack says absolutely right, end stage. And he says, then came the internet and the money vampires that followed. So they dump all their debt here, then strip the place of assets like copper thieves pulling wiring out of the walls. Then came the downsizing, the buyouts, the layoffs. And so Houston asks, right, is that what happened to you, right? The money vampires. And Jack is just like, no, man, they fired my ass. I'm a drunk. This is why I love the way that Matt Fraction writes. It's amazing, right? And so at that point, Jack ends up running on what basically used to be his former boss, seemingly. And he just says, the eye over Gotham never blinks, right? I have something that you need to see. And so that's where they go into an office, right? And they just kind of start talking about everything. This guy's seemingly the managing editor. So this is the top guy to talk to. But then you start to realize nothing's going to come out of it. Jack just comes storming out of this office because this guy's just not going to do anything with the information, and they ultimately leave. Now, as short as this whole interaction may be, this will be stupendously important because Matt Fraction does this as well. Matt Fraction will just suddenly transition to a moment in the middle of a story, and it'll seem innocuous. It'll seem like, okay, so this is just kind of a continuation of a background story, but then you're going to get to a point in his run where that becomes the main story. So keeping this kind of stuff in mind is incredibly important here. And so at that point, you switch over to the hideout of a villain known as Anarchy. And to say that he's a villain is very much straining the word. Anarchy was kind of like a single-serving character in Matt Fraction's run up to this point. And so, of course, as he's kind of running through this place, suddenly like a couple of guys are just like thrown through a window. And there's just like a note attached to one of them, right? Friends of yours, it seems pretty stupid. And so immediately he takes off running and jumps out of a window. And as soon as that happens, Batman catches him and he just asks, what was your plan here, Lonnie? Because this one seems pretty weak. And so once they get down to the ground, Batman, of course, beats the crap out of Lonnie because Lonnie tries to gas him. And then Batman takes him to basically a vacant apartment where Lonnie's base of operations resides. And he just says, like, you try to steal a truck, you fail miserably, and now you've got gangs of goons lurking around your squat waiting to get you. It doesn't add up, right? How did a truck you didn't steal make Anarchy the Gotham Underworld's most wanted person? And that's where Anarchy just says, I don't know, man, I swear, right? A guy paid me $1,000 to boost the truck and dump it into the river. That's it. That's all they did. But everything went bad. And that's where Batman says, dead driver, dead flunky, dead cops, the Black Fang, the Besnas, and the Thieves Guild gunning for each other and for you. Bad undersells it, Lonnie. You've literally turned the entire criminal underworld against you. And so at that point, Anarchy's just like, I want to turn state's evidence, right? Hand me over to the cops, do something, protect me. And Batman just says, like, you're really scared, man, right? You're so scared. You jumped out of a window with no way down. Who are you running from? And Lonnie just says, are you messing with me, right? I can't tell if it's the concussion or the blood rushing to my head or if you're messing with me. And Batman just tells him, I do not have time to mess with you, Lonnie. Tell me what is going on. And at that point, Lonnie just tells him, right, some detective you are. Haven't you noticed how quiet it's been? How the freaks are all laying low and there's nobody but jank-ass street gangs pulling jobs out there. There's a new guy in charge of organized crime in Gotham, and I am telling you, he's got it really organized. And so at that point, you switch over to all these different individuals being brought together. But you also have Vandal Savage, again, the Gotham City Police Commissioner. And he just says, ladies and gentlemen of the Taurus, good evening. Know that as part of my arrangement with your group, all of you have my personal guarantee of safety on these premises. Come in, welcome. We are about to begin. And that's where the Minotaur is standing there. So any theories you may have had that Vandal Savage is secretly the Minotaur running things behind the scenes? Nope, two different people in two different places. And that's where the Minotaur just says, where there is value, there is crime. Where there is crime, there is profit. And where there is profit, the Taurus shall reap. And this is where you start to find out what's going on here, right? He says, a Taurus is one of the prime knots, 7 independent yet interconnected loops made unbreakable together, just like us, right? And he starts running over all these different gangs, right? Some who run vice rackets, some who run the henchmen, so on and so forth. But he says, I am the bank. I manage all contracts and trade rates, and I keep your money flowing. clean and insured. And it works as long as the 7 of us work together in harmony. And then at that point, he literally has this kind of drape removed. And he says, before the current unpleasantness, profits were up 418% year over year. Over the last day, we are down $4.4 million each. At this rate, we will miss quarterly projections in 8 days. In my function as the bank, I froze everyone's accounts. I thought if money meant more than your bond to the rest of us, then cutting everyone off would get your attention. But just in case, I have brought some of your family here tonight. Do I have your attention now? And everyone's flabbergasted by this. And he says the Taurus isn't really an organization like a gang or a family. It's a system, an algorithm of crime. And I am the only person alive who can keep the whole equation in my head. And he says, I have built the world's first resilient criminal empire at scale. I guarantee you all infinite profit on an infinite curve. And it could only happen with us here and now in this unique moment. A business-friendly police force, a malleable city hall, an incurious press, freak crime brought to heel, and by choking off the street gangs, the Bat stays too busy to realize how entangled we have all become and how successful. In 20 months, the Taurus will control a piece of every revenue stream in Gotham, criminal or legitimate. In 20 years, the world. When one of us earns, we all earn. But when one of us bleeds, we all bleed. And he sticks his hand in the air and closes his fist with his 7 fingers, which is pretty wonky. And in turn, all these guns are put to the backs of these crime lords' families' heads, right? And so at that point, you switch back over to Batman when he was informed by Anarchy of what was going on, right? Anarchy just says, he's called the Minotaur Batman. He's turned Gotham City into a labyrinth of crime, and you are too late to stop him. We are already trapped inside of it with him, and there is no way out. So, at that point, we switch over to Bruce Wayne's date. And in fact, it's really adorable, right? Because when Bruce shows up to pick up Annika, she's dressed up, right? She's got a skirt, she's got a nice button-down shirt, she's got some good-looking heels. She insists that it's not a date. I have never heard of a woman in my life that would dress in such a fantastic way and didn't think she was going on a date with a guy. That's nonsense. To say nothing of the fact that Bruce is driving one of the most dope cars that I think I've ever seen, right? A GTO, it just looks fantastic. I feel like I need to buy one of those. But he presents her with a gift, right? I mean, from her perspective, she's like, it's not a date. She's like, did you really think it was a date? And he's like, no, it's not a date. And she's like, yeah, I know it's not a date, but you gave me a gift. So that means you clearly think it's a date. They both think it's a date, but neither one of them want to admit the fact that it's a date. But the funny thing about this is that as they're making their way through traffic, Bruce starts to notice something, right? He starts to notice that they're being followed. But again, it's one of these really amazing moments here, because where he's bobbing and weaving, right? In between cars and basically driving like a maniac. She's just like, what in the world? But at that point he says, I read everything I could about your work and I find it fascinating, hopeful, inspiring even. I was hoping that we could come to terms on funding for your project over a meal. And she just says, I'm sensing a but. And he says, but I think those men following us are trying to kill you. And she's like, kill me? Who would do that? And Bruce just says, the guys with the swords back there. And he just says, look up, because they're jumping off their motorcycles and onto the car. So he just hits the gas, runs over a couple of them, and just starts blasting out of there as fast as she can. And Annika's just like, why is this happening? And he just says, some guys just hate seeing the doctor, I guess. And so he just keeps on gassing, and he says, I'm gonna get you out of this, Dr. Zeller, I promise. Now keep in mind, she doesn't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman, but I mean, come on, how do you not connect these dots like this, right? And so he's just blowing through these guys, hitting them with cars. He's pulling off these crazy maneuvers with his car, right? He's sideswiping these guys, and then they ultimately go flying over a bridge, and he just says, hang on, and she's like, to what? Right? So they go crashing down into Little Tokyo, and the vehicle just goes flying into an alley, but because of the fact that the hood's sticking halfway up, Batman can't see anything out of the front window, so he's like, I can't see a damn thing, and she just says, they're still coming, and then they ultimately crash the car, and so she's like, I dropped my present, right? This is such a bad date, which I don't know what she's talking about. This date looks amazing. It looks looks so much fun, right? And Bruce is just like, leave it. And she just says, no, right? This has been awful. I deserve a gift. And he says, Annika, we have to run. And she just says, then put me down and let's go, because she's a very confident, headstrong woman, right? She will not be carried. And so at that point, someone just kind of appears out of nowhere and they're like, what the hell was that? And Bruce just says, I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not good. And this girl just appears behind them, right? And she looks amazing. Now, here's where Matt Fraction starts drawing on different cultural elements. It almost kind of feels like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because at that point, Annika asks the question, what the hell are you? And Bruce just like tosses her into a dumpster and just says, stay down. And like this chick comes running after him. And so what's nuts is she brandishes these two swords that basically look like lightsabers, right? And when she comes running at Bruce, they start cutting through this dumpster, but they hit the box that Annika has in her hand. And when they hit it, the titanographine, it breaks one of the swords. And so she's like, holy hell, right? She didn't realize what it was that was in the box, right? She just knew that she was given a gift. But this girl comes after Batman anyway. Now, of course, Bruce, as you would expect, right, is able to hold his own. But at this point, it's more bobbing and weaving than anything else. But one of the things that goes on is she actually gets a slash on him. And that's where Matt Fraction chimes in, right? Bruce Wayne wears body armor when he's not walking around as Batman. And it's highly durable stuff. And so in the midst of this whole fight between him and her, the bikers show back up again. And that's when Bruce realizes they're not allies. These guys are enemies, right? That there's something bigger going on here. And so when this chick just kind of like disappears in a flock of birds, as crazy as that may sound, right? The good doctor just pops her head out of the dumpster and just says, so the woman made of birds and the motorcycle men are not friends. And that's where Bruce just says, it appears multiple parties have interest in collecting a bounty on you, Dr. Zeller. That means chaos in the marketplace. Let's exploit it. And so she asks, right, what the hell was in that box that you gave me? It broke her sword. And he said, a tube of titanographine. My way of saying I look forward to working with you, doctor. And she just says, right, like, I left it in the dumpster. It's worth a fortune. And he's like, I have a fortune, right? What I don't have is more of you. Keeping you alive is the most important thing. And he says, so let's survive the night, doctor, and you can have all the titanographine you want. And so she asks, right, should we call the cops? And Bruce says, no, we should 100% run, because as Batman, he knows enough to know that the Gotham City Police Department is a part of this, right? And even if not all the cops, certainly Vandal Savage, he's a bad guy. Of course he's behind this in some capacity. And so there was a little bit of banter back and forth about the idea of whether or not it was actually a date. That at the end of the day, she's just kind of like, I can't climb up a ladder in these heels like this. So Bruce is like, get on my back. And he starts climbing the ladder. And that's where she seemingly kind of starts putting clues together, right? Where she's like, you really work out. And he says, it's because of your work. And she's like, you work out because of my work? And he's like, no. Right, in the car, you asked, why is any of this happening? And he says, it's your work. Violent and powerful people feel threatened by the idea that their idea of identity can be changed if they choose, and they would rather kill you than confront the possibility of making it. Something like that, anyway, right? People's worldview is being challenged, right? In times of desperation, people will believe what they want to believe. That's really just how humanity works. And so at that point, once they get to the roof, right, Dr. Zeller's just like, okay, look, do not look up my skirt. She's like, yes, I'm wearing a skirt, so be a gentleman and do not look up, because this is going to be decidedly unladylike. But once they're up on the roof, this chick with the swords is up there waiting on him. And Zeller just says, like, she's here. And that's where Bruce, and this is one of the dopest part of the source. He just takes off his jacket, right? And he just says, stay down, stay quiet. This is me repaying the favor. And so he starts talking to this woman and he just says, cute trick, but I am not some Trip Z sword boy on a dirt bike pretending to be a killer. And she just says, no, you are not. What are you, I wonder, when you're not pretending to be this? And Bruce is just like, come here and I'll show you. Dude, it's one of the dopest lines that I've ever heard. And I love it. I don't know why, but I just love it, right? Like, come over here and I'll show you, right? Here's the crazy thing. In the middle of this, when she goes in for the attack, Damian shows up, Robin shows up, and Bruce is like, no, right? And he just like throws down, right, all these little things on the ground, which basically kind of electrocute her and knock her out, right? It's called the bat snare, but essentially it's just a trap, like an electrical trap. Now, of course, this gives her the opportunity to escape, right? Because when she's being electrocuted, she just turns into a flock of birds and just flies away. And that's where Damian just says, the Ojo, right? I studied her during my time with a League of Assassins. Rapid onset decoherence is most effective to neutralize, assuming one must adhere to a no-killing policy, Father. And in that moment, Dr. Zeller comes out from behind the water tower. Father! Damian Wayne just ruined it all, man. The jig is up, and Bruce Wayne is pissed. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.